is a classic album review because I've been waiting to do this so long. This is a classic album review. All of you been waiting on. Oh my god. Not as good as Jeremy. It's not as good as Jeremy. Yeah. So funny. So funny. Hello everybody. Thank you for tuning in to ChannelBK. I'm Brian. My computer's legit old and it's finally said, screw you, Brian. And a lot of other things going on. And yeah, classic album reviews. Where are they? Blah, blah, blah. They're just going to come all this year at random points. I don't know. Oh, wait. Hold on. There we go. We got the filter on this video. Yeah, it's been a lot. We're working with it. We're trying it. It's going to be different. And yeah. Is survived by Touché Amoré. Shut up. Let's just get into it. Touché Amoré is a rock, mostly post-hardcore group. This is their third studio album, which came out in 2013. And this marked a huge change for the group, bringing in producer Brad Wood to not necessarily make a more accessible album, but to make something that was possibly more pleasant on the years. Obviously with their debut, To the Beat of a Dead Horse, and then following that up in 2011 with Parting the Sea Between Brightness and Me. They, again, them being a post-hardcore group, these albums were very much blunt, in your face. They were, they were exactly what they were, with the sound, with the structure specifically, but also with the length. And then this album sort of was, again, and still is at the time of recording, the pillar of their discography, because then following this album we had Stage 4 and Lament, which are fabulous albums, but these two albums were a little bit more in the style of what this album was trying to do, with stuff that is a little more anthemic, more kind of structured to songs, maybe stuff that's a little punchier sounding, a little not cleaner, but just having that feel that has a little bit of a shine on it, the song structure. Even though this album has a lot of that, and their work down the road still has that kind of punchiness to it and that aggression, and some songs that are maybe a little bit tighter put together and shorter. This album is still the framework for what the group started to do after the fact, and they do it very well. Now, if you are aware of Touché Amoré's discography, you would know that obviously the first two albums a little darker, a little heavier. The following two albums, won't spoil it but for anyone else, but are also very dark, very depressing. They are in your face. Obviously, it's a little punchier and a little bit, produced a little differently. But it's still the same thing. Whereas this album is punchy, it's in your face, it's loud, it's aggressive. But it deals with a lot of topics that I think the band has never dealt with. And obviously Jeremy, lead singer, as I beautifully did an impersonation of. I even shaved my head, not for the video, but in honor of Jeremy. The lyrics on this album are, they're not necessarily like upbeat and happy, but this album is a little bit brighter in that regard. It's a lot of talking about success and the band sort of hitting a new high with this album and having to write songs about that, and not necessarily lying about what you're going through, and being very honest and upfront. Again, this album is not just happiness the whole time. There are a lot of dark subjects on here, but it mainly deals with the ideas of living and existing and surviving. Obviously the title is Survived By, and the album's lyrics sort of go through this really interesting flow from the very first track, Just Exist, where Jeremy had a conversation with someone, and when they asked, like, what do you want your legacy to be? He was kind of, he felt like it was a very corny answer, or his loudest cliche, rather, as he says in the lyrics. And it's him, just talking about just kind of the typical stuff you'd hear from an artist or, whoever in this space. But then by the end of the song, he kind of comes around, and after taking some time to think about it, he comes with the phrase, he just wants to exist, right? And he just wants to be here. He wants to have that memory of him and to just be in existence, rather than just be like, I want to be remembered for this or this great songwriter, whatever. And that sort of sets us down the journey through a lot of the topics on this album. Like the following track, To Write Content, which again sort of just deals with his whole mind thinking like, I don't want to write songs about sadness because that's very false and phony, and that's not necessarily something that I should necessarily bring up, and you know, him having to write content. Then following that up with Praise/Love, which is a really beautiful poem that leads into Anyone/Anything, where he's talking about what he thinks he needs from people and what he has to give to other people as well. I like the fact that these songs are kind of hand in hand with each other with the topics and the lyrics, which he follows up on Anyone/Anything with, I don't owe anyone. I don't owe anything. And he's trying to realize that and not have to feel like he has to put his heart and soul out there, or mainly he just doesn't have to feel like he has to give it his all in certain aspects. Sometimes, you know, he can take a break and have time for himself, and it's him coming to that realization. And again, the way the lyrics flow from the poem, which is more so of a poem, to this song where he's including it at the end of the song, I think it's beautiful. DNA has Jeremy kind of breaking down the cycles of not necessarily abuse, but the cycles of being like your parents, and he's talking about how his dad his DNA rather, made Jeremy the kind of person that he is today, and how he wants to kind of break that cycle of, you know, at the end of the day, you're always going to be like your parents, but you have to sort of become your own person. Harbor also kind of brings in some elements of him feeling like he is giving out more than he is receiving, which is a sentiment I feel like a lot of people give, but for him being an artist, he has that emotional sense of, you know, he feels like no matter what, like he is always going to be giving because of his music. And again, in this newfound fame that the group had, that was probably a lot of the stuff he was going through and the group was going through, and him having to come to that realization that, you know, he needs to receive stuff. We all need to receive that, right? We all have to receive attention and happiness and, you know, love. And it's kind of a therapeutic album. I mean, all of their albums are very therapeutic in that way, but this is, in my opinion, probably one of the more extreme cases of it and more beautiful cases, because it is experimental and they're trying new things with song structure, and you know, not everything is just so blah, 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 and he's coming at you. There's a lot more beautiful moments. Again, the song lengths feel like kind of traditional song lengths as well, and it's a great switch up for the content as well. We do get some of the more shorter tracks on here with something like Blue Angels, which is dealing with addiction and the effects that it has. A song that, you know, probably a lot of groups or artists, you know, put together, but I think it's a solid tune as well. But Social Caterpillar, which follows it up, is dealing with him having this newfound openness and outgoingness, and him being like, you know, I want to be out here more and talk to people and be happy and outgoing, and this new person that I've become, and how this could be the new me, because before I was so sheltered, but now I'm opening up. And again, with a title like that and a concept like that, you would think maybe if it was done in another aspect, it would be kind of corny. I think it's done very well. Nonfiction, which I'll get into the actual sound of the song in a little bit, but the way that the song deals with time and how, you know, time can be looked at in such a beautiful way of how things change, but also just kind of the grim realities that it poses to us as well. We followed that up with Steps, which is very on the nose with at least the title, but the sound of the song and the lyrics of the song are very well done, you know, taking the steps to kind of better yourself and to, again, make yourself happier, to find the things of getting yourself through and to overcome things, to accept love and to bring it in, and again, like, to not be so guarded by it. And then Is Survived By is, I think, a fantastic way to end the album, because it basically answers a question posed on the beginning of the album, like, what do you want to be remembered for? And he is talking about being survived by love, being survived by grief, being survived by all these things that I hope that I have brought to the music community and the people that listen to us and the world and all that. And I think, again, from a lyrical perspective, it's some of the most dense stuff that Jeremy has written about. And I mean, it's pretty sad to have this album be so, like, cathartic and beautiful and emotional and happy in a way before a lot of the later topics of the next two albums, which kind of drops back into that sadness. But in this moment, Jeremy can kind of have that freeing nature. Now, sonically, you know, Touché Amoré, just because they have a new producer and they are going in a different direction. Doesn't mean the sound of this album is necessarily that different. The beginning of this entire album, Just Exist, has these great marching drums, and I love the way that it kind of breaks down on, I would assume would be the chorus or like kind of the hook part of the song. Again, the boom ba da da dum boom ba da ba bum bam bam na na na. Again, the guitars I'm going to talk about a lot. The drums sound fantastic, but the guitars are definitely one of the shining parts of this album in the ways that they produce them. Like on To Write Content, which is the following song. Again, the bright guitars on here are fantastic. And again, Touché Amoré is known for having a lot of interesting dynamics in their songs, and this album does not shy away from it. There are so many different changes and, you know, slowdowns and speed ups, and on this song, the way the song just kind of stops. And then we have that boo, 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 boo on the guitar. Praise/love and anyone/anything does, like I was telling you with the lyrics, where it kind of connects everything. But there is a beautiful haunting guitar on Praise/love, which is the same guitar that is on anyone/anything, a great kind of part one, part two, but I love the drums on here. They're anthemic, they're driving, they're in your face, and it makes you feel so good. DNA has a really interesting drum pattern as well, where again it starts and then on the chorus parts, it's a little kind of subtle. It's a little subtle. And then it comes back, and again, just all these little things on an album that is just under a half an hour. Makes you feel like this album is so much more dense and compact with so many interesting things on it, where it doesn't feel like it's a half an hour. Harbor definitely has one of the more anthemic endings on a song here, again, with the sound that this album is going through. But then Kerosene, the guitars on here are crazy sounding. They are eerie, they are haunting. They're kind of uncomfortable to listen to. The way they are mixed sounds like terrifying and like something out of like a horror movie. Blue Angel switches things up again too. Obviously the whole addiction metaphor and, you know, the storytelling in that. It is one of the shorter songs again on the album, but the way that it ends with kind of the very straight up drums and guitar riffs, with Jeremy kind of slowing things down with his final verse of the entire song, and I think that helps bring the song to these kind of heavenly highs that addiction probably gives people. I was mentioning earlier about nonfiction and kind of waiting to break it down, but this song is a verse, and then it's another verse, and there's a lot of artists that have done stuff like this where it's, you know, the mental state of the repetition of things, whereas this song does things a little differently, where Jeremy, the way he says the first verse, it's underneath all of this. You barely hear him. It sounds like terrifying, and he's like, it sounds claustrophobic, and he's like, oh my god, the world is ending, the time, blah blah blah. And then the second half, where the sweeping guitars and drums come in, and he soars over the instrumentation, and it gives that life of, we can either be terrified at time and the sadness of it, but it's also a beauty in having to accept it and also knowing you have to live life to the fullest. And Jeremy is just such a great poet and storyteller that, again, it's not about the topics. Things can be redundant, things can be done so many different times, but it's how you tell it. And it's haunting, and just the kind of back and forth of it is what every human goes through, and the sound of it is really well done too, to give us that feeling. And then I was saying how on Praise/love there's a lot of similar traits from that to anyone/anything. Same thing with Steps. The same guitar riff from Nonfiction shows up here at the second half of the song, and again just kind of ties everything together with these little stories within the overarching story, and it comes across so well, because every song feels complete. They're not like intros or outros to each other, or they don't feel like these kind of minuscule songs, or interludes rather. They fit. And that's not to say interludes are bad or anything, but it's like interludes are used to be kind of a connecting thread, whereas these still all feel like songs that work with each other. And then Is Survived By kind of brings in some classic Touché Amoré sound to it as well, with the drums and the guitar, and then kind of, you know, Jeremy going back and forth, and the way that it kind of gets a little bit more somber in the second half, but again, uplifting. And you see all of the, no pun intended, the DNA on this album when it comes to the storytelling and the way that Jeremy is approaching songwriting. And then again, the lengths of the song and the way that the album is produced. It is something where, again, if you're going to dabble into that sound, which I know I've been hearing a lot of artists lately kind of abandon what they're so known for. Some of them do different sounds very well, and you can jump into that and kind of add your own style to it in a good way or in a bad way. And again, sometimes artists achieve that, sometimes they don't. I think Touché Amoré does, because I think if you're not really into this sound of music, which believe me, before stage 4 I was like, I don't know if I want to listen to it, but obviously Jeremy as a songwriter and a singer, he does a lot more for me where I'm like, okay, I'm invested and I'm engaged. But sonically, this is, I think, the best album to jump into from them to start off if you feel like Touché Amoré. I don't know if I want to get into it because it's aggressive, it's in your face, it's violent. But I think lyrically, it's some of the more upbeat stuff. There's definitely kind of a commercialism to that, right? Like, it's not like a commercial album, but there's things about it where I think people might be more intrigued by. It's beautiful, it's haunting. Again, there's some punchiness there. I think the guitars and the drums sound fantastic. And the topics here, I think, are some of the more general feeling emotions that people have. And it, you know, again, for an artist where you're listening to these people, you know, possibly making all this money or living the dream, and they're talking about their own worth and, you know, self-esteem, again, can come across a certain way, and you can be kind of like annoyed by it. But again, the band does it in a way where Jeremy is so good at just storytelling and lyricism and all that, to where you just are so engaged by it, and the music works so well with him that I think this album's fantastic. And again, with everything going on, I wanted to review this at the end of 2023 because it was the 10-year anniversary of this album. They put out a new version of it where it's like slowed down, or it's like chopped a certain way. But yeah, this album is really fucking awesome and it's fantastic. If you haven't listened to it, go check it out. What do you think of Touché Amoré? What do you think of this album? Leave it in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe. Again, I'm going to be putting out classic album reviews all year. I apologize for the craziness. You know, I've been trying to post what I can. But until next time, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for tuning in to ChannelBK. Peace out, everybody.